All right, let's get into it. When you think of the Greek gods, who pops into your head? Zeus and his lightning bolts? Poseidon with that big trident of his? Well, today we are talking about one of the most powerful, complicated, and just plain brilliant figures to ever walk Mount Olympus, Athena. She's a warrior, a genius strategist, a patron of the arts, and the goddess of wisdom. Honestly, her story feels less like some dusty old myth and more like a modern-day superhero movie. And you know, every great hero needs a truly epic origin story. But Athena's, it isn't just epic, it's probably one of the weirdest in all of mythology. It all kicks off with this wild question. What if a goddess wasn't born in the usual way, but literally burst into existence from a headache? Yeah, you heard that right. We're starting with her completely unique, one-of-a-kind cranial birth. So forget everything you know about how life begins. This is a story about a scary prophecy, a whole lot of paranoia, and what you could call divine brain surgery. So the whole thing starts with Zeus, the king of all the gods. Now, he'd just overthrown his own dad, Cronus, and he was absolutely terrified that the same thing would happen to him. And then comes this prophecy warning him that his first wife, the super wise goddess Metis, would have a daughter, but her next kid, a son, would be the one to kick him off the throne. Zeus's solution to this problem was, well, it was intense. To stop the prophecy from ever coming true, he tricked Metis and swallowed her whole while she was pregnant. He figured he'd absorb her wisdom and trap the kid inside him forever. But pretty soon, he got the worst headache in the history of existence, a skull-splitting, mind-numbing agony. He was so desperate, he ordered Hephaestus, the blacksmith god, to grab his axe and literally crack his head open. And the second he did, bam, out leaps Athena. Not as a maybe, mind you, but as a full-grown warrior, decked out in armor and ready for a fight. And she did not come into the world quietly. She exploded into being with a war cry so loud it literally shook the heavens and the earth. Just think about that. Born from pure thought, from the mind of the king of gods, she was a warrior goddess from her very first breath. It's no wonder she was instantly his favorite. Now that really unique birth story, it shaped everything about her. She wasn't just another goddess of war, she was the goddess of smart war. So let's take a look at her divine gear, her toolkit, if you will, the symbols that tell us everything we need to know about this incredible strategist. You can really see who she is when you put her next to her half-brother Ares. See, he was a god of war too, but he was all about the ugly side of it, the bloodlust, the chaos, the raw brutality. The other gods, including their own father Zeus, pretty much couldn't stand him. But Athena, she was the total opposite. She was the goddess of strategy, of tactics, of knowing why and when to fight. He was the stormer of cities. She was the protector. And at the center of her warrior image is the Aegis. Now, this was no ordinary shield. It was a terrifying symbol of divine power. Sometimes it's shown as a cloak fringed with snakes, but it always has that horrifying centerpiece, the head of the Gorgon Medusa. Yeah, that Medusa, whose gaze could turn her enemies to solid stone. It was the ultimate defense and a weapon of pure fear. And what about her famous sidekick, the owl? This incredible little creature can see perfectly in the dark, which made it the perfect symbol for Athena's brand of wisdom. The ability to see the truth when everyone else is lost, to find clarity in the middle of chaos and confusion. The owl was so connected to her that it even ended up on the coins of her favorite city. But she wasn't all about war and tactical thinking. Her third major symbol, the olive tree, stood for something completely different. It was all about peace, prosperity, and the very building blocks of civilization. And believe me, this gift is going to be a huge deal in one of the biggest showdowns in Greek mythology. You know, a goddess this multi-talented couldn't just have one name. She had a ton of different titles, or epithets, almost like code names for all her different roles. As Polios, she was the guardian of the city. As Promachos, she was the champion who fights out in front. As Parthenos, she was the virgin, a symbol of her independence. And as Argane, she was the patron saint of weavers, potters, and all kinds of craftspeople. So with all this power, wisdom, and gear, what did she actually do? Well, Athena wasn't the type to just sit back and watch. She was hands-on, deeply involved in the world of mortals, acting as a patron for the greatest heroes and the greatest cities of the age. And her most famous act of patronage? It was an all-out contest for the heart and soul of a city, the city that we now know as Athens. And she went head-to-head with one of the most powerful gods there is, Poseidon, god of the sea. And this contest just shows the difference between them perfectly. Poseidon, who's all about raw, brute strength, he slams his trident into the rock of the Acropolis and creates a salt water spring. I mean, it's a big, flashy symbol of sea power, but not very useful, right? Then comes Athena, and with her strategic mind, she gives a single, simple, thoughtful gift, the olive tree. This one tree could provide food, oil for lamps, and wood for building. It was a gift of peace and long-term prosperity. The people chose wisdom over power, and so the city was named Athens in her honor. She was also, without a doubt, a hero's best friend. Think of her as the divine brains behind the operation. It was Athena who gave Perseus that polished shield to defeat Medusa. She was the one constantly guiding the clever Odysseus on his decade-long trip home. She helped Heracles figure out how to pull off his impossible labors. She even helped Jason and the Argonauts build their legendary ship, the Argo. She was the ultimate mentor. But, and this is a really big but, don't ever mistake her wisdom for weakness. Athena had a fierce, and I mean fierce, uncompromising side. If you crossed her, especially if you were arrogant about it, the punishment was swift and terrible. She demanded respect, and she had a zero-tolerance policy for hubris. Hubris, you know, that toxic kind of pride where you think you're better than everyone, even the gods, that was a direct insult to her. To challenge Athena in her own areas of expertise, like wisdom or crafts, well, that was basically asking for a terrible fate. Just take a look at these two stories. First, Arachne, a human weaver, had the nerve to boast that she was a better weaver than Athena herself. So they have a contest, and Athena, furious at her pride, transforms Arachne into the very first spider, doomed to weave for eternity. Now, the story of Medusa is way more tragic and complicated. She was a priestess in Athena's temple, and Poseidon assaulted her there. As a punishment for her sacred temple being desecrated, Athena transforms the victim, Medusa, into a monster. It's a story that reveals a cold, harsh form of justice, and it's one that, through modern eyes, is a really troubling tale. So, from a truly bizarre birth to a really complex legacy of wisdom, war, and vengeance, Athena's story is one of the richest in all of mythology, and her influence definitely didn't stop when ancient Greece fell. Over the centuries, she's become this powerful, international symbol for some of our greatest ideals: wisdom, rational thought, justice, democracy, you name it. She represents the triumph of intellect and strategy over chaos and brute force. Her legacy is literally all around us today. You see her name on major companies like Athena Health, in groundbreaking computer science projects like MIT's Project Athena, and you see her statue at countless universities and libraries, where she stands as the ultimate symbol of knowledge. And all that brings us to one last question. We live in an age of nonstop information, but maybe not always a lot of wisdom. So, what can we, today, still learn from a goddess who was born from pure thought, who championed strategy over violence, and who demanded respect for knowledge? That's definitely something to think about.